I'm going to hand over to Sam Marshall, who has an MSc in Artificial Intelligence, and Alex Lustig, who has direct experience of designing and deploying workplace bots. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Aj. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining this webinar on chatbots. I'm Sam Marshall from ClearBox. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Alex Lustig. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Hey, Sam. How's it going?
Yeah, very well, thank you, and thanks for joining us on this. Let me just introduce myself, and then Alex can say who he is. So I run ClearBox. We are a specialist consultancy based in the UK, and we focus on the business side of digital workplaces. We're particularly interested in formulating strategies that help organizations make sense of the digital workplaces, often across, for example, Office 365, social networks, and rising communication channels such as chatbots. And Alex, over to you.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Alex Lustig. I am an innovation and experience analyst here at LiveTiles. It's kind of a fancy way of saying that I am on the pre-sales team. I've done a lot of work with United States bot opportunities. It's where I've been with the company for most of the last year. Actually been in Europe for the last 3 months or so, now supporting European operations, pretty much focused on bots. So I had used LiveTiles at a previous company, which is why I work here now. I thought it was a really innovative solution around their SharePoint offering, but they've since moved in to a lot of work within the bot space. So happy to be supporting that. And we actually offer a really cool bot platform that I will be talking to as we go through the demo.
All right, that sounds great. So before we get into the content, let's do a little bit of a poll, because we're curious to see how much experience people have been exposed to so far with chatbots in their personal life. So you should see a set of options popping up now for you to vote on. So the question is, how often do you use a chatbot in your personal life? Daily, weekly, monthly, or rarely? And we'll count never as rarely. Always looking on the positive side. So I'll give you a few more seconds to click on a button, and then we'll have a look at the results.
Half of people have voted, so we'll just give you a few more seconds to find the button.
Yeah, this is really just to check to see if the audience is awake, Wedge. So we're halfway there so far. I know it's early hours in some parts of the world and late at night in others. All right, so Alex, we got the leading one is monthly at 41% and rarely at 35%, weekly at 24%. Are you surprised by that distribution?
It's interesting. Yeah, so I thought we'd have a few more daily users just on the perhaps the more household side of chatbots and AI. You could think of something like an Alexa or Siri or Google Voice. But it's interesting. I think even monthly, it does show some adoption, and there's actually a fair amount of weekly. The fact that a quarter of the people are saying that there is some weekly adoption, it's certainly something we could speak to, and maybe why some of this is as we go through.
I mean, weekly in your personal life is pretty high to me, and I must admit myself, I didn't necessarily think of Alexa when I said chatbot. I tend to think of that more as being typed interfaces. So, yeah, if it was voice, I'd use it daily for me.
Yeah.
If it was everything else, probably actually I'm still at the rarely end. So I cover both boxes on this. All right, let's get into the agenda for today. We're going to start by talking about how to get started with a workplace bot, and Alex is going to tell us some of the steps involved in that, and look at bots for employee services and what LiveTiles call cobots. And then at the end, I'll lead off a discussion, which is what we at ClearBox see as success factors for bots, and look forward to getting Alex's opinion on that. So Alex, I'm going to pass control to you if you want to take us through the getting started section.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a good place to start is just about what actually is a chatbot in this case. So I think a good start to this is just that, really this is an interface where an end user is conversing with a bot, in the very traditional sense through text. And really what it is it's just a very different way to both submit and then gather information. Right, the rules and the logic that are used, that you have to go down a particular set of paths. But then there's the AI-driven chatbots that they improve over time, and you can speak to a bit more conversationally, right? So the ones that use machine learning, natural language processing in order to understand intent, and then proceed through a series of actions from there. So
Do you have any sense of the distribution of how many are smart like that versus more like a decision tree?
So yeah, so I guess the more intelligent ones are really just starting to hit the market in a bigger scale now, because it's much easier to have the decision tree logic behind there, right, and have very rigid paths. I think what we're going to see, especially moving into the future, is as this machine learning becomes more available, you're going to see a bit more adoption of that as the backbone, I guess, to a lot of these chatbots.
Sure. Yeah.
So I guess a good point is what is the purpose of a chatbot as a virtual, in this case, like a personal assistant, right? Why is this valuable? Well, some of the customers that we've worked with here at LiveTiles are quite large. Some of them are 80, 85,000 users. And you can think of a customer of that size, they're really never going to be able to hire 85,000 personal assistants. So these chatbots, and particularly these AI-driven chatbots that actually understand meeting, and not just understand meeting, but can also act proactively, that can reach out to you and ask if you need something or ask if you can help, are going to be really important. And being able to talk with this bot in very plain language and not have to talk with it as one would imagine talking to a bot, in very complete sentences, where you can just write a noun, write a verb, and have that intent understood by the bot, is very important. When it comes to the different channels that bot can be deployed on, this is going to be very important. Something we've seen at LiveTiles is that different companies are going to use different channels and different places where they communicate, where they collaborate. So, for instance, we're a big Microsoft Teams organization. We partner with a lot of companies that use Slack, right? And that's just going to be a difference between companies. So we need to be able to have bots that are within the collaboration and communication platform that companies are using, and we have to understand that those are going to differ. And then from there, bots being able to make something like submitting a form very simple, being able to do that through a multitude of devices, be them phones, tablets, computers, whatever it may be. And then also within that, talking with these disparate systems. This is going to be a big point for bots in the future. I think one of the problems that most organizations have is they have to go to many different places to do many different things. And if bots can integrate with those systems and bring a lot of that content together, and you can have all of that interaction through a single user interface, that's going to be a big point for the future as we go forward. So a little bit of how we've seen chatbots used so far is really the use cases are unlimited, but these are just some of the bigger ones that we've seen. So the personal assistants we've discussed, and this could be anything from booking meetings to taking notes, looking at schedules, things like that. But then it also goes into the team assistant, and I've actually seen some work done within the Australian branch of our company on how team assistants have been used, actually almost like a bot, like a campaign bot or a project bot, where you can now check the status of a particular project, be able to see what the next steps are, things like that. Company assistants we've seen as well. So this is more perhaps something like a manager being able to get information on employees, perhaps even looking at something like reporting, so you could have dashboards or reports that the bot is able to access, display in real time. And then a big one that we've seen as well are the external bots. So something like a help desk is a great point for this, because every company, most every large company or even medium, small-sized companies have help desks, which is a really good point. So it's something that almost defies the vertical or the industry that many companies are in, is that help desk, or being able to put a bot out there to show, hey, we really care about our customers, especially when there's no human support, to be able to still support the customers through something like a chatbot. So we're going to talk a little bit about the collaboration bots and a little bit of what that looks like. So the term for that we would use is cobots. So you may see that within other companies, but let's talk a little to the collaboration bots and how we see this really impacting the workforce in the future. So this is a pretty standard org chart. So something like this, very typical org chart. You have the CEO at the top, reporting to the board, but then also overseeing perhaps VPs within other departments, middle managers within their teams that sit below that. Pretty standard org chart. So when we think of chatbots and AI-driven chatbots, we don't think of them displacing people within this particular situation. We don't see this as bots sitting where people should be. Instead, what we see is something more like this. And what you'll see is that we see people having their own bots for different things. So you can imagine things like team bots, or perhaps an extra member of this organization that even helps down here. The CEO would have a bot perhaps to give information on some of the other departments. The board has a bot to understand what's going on at a higher level. So we really see bots assisting people. And what we think bots are going to do is eventually just give people more time to do more meaningful work. We want the bots to take away some of the mundane work. We want chatbots to be somewhere you can go to get information, to save you time and really make you a bit more productive. And really how we see that happening is for something like an assistant bot, different kinds of bots, right? So we think that one bot that is going to do everything isn't going to be a successful bot. So we want bots that are able to do some things really well. And should there be a need to speak with other bots, bots actually communicating within bots. So you can imagine you ask the HR bot a finance-related question, that the HR bot can say, yep, that's really not a question that I'm equipped to answer, but the finance bot is. And being able to actually have that conversation right there within the experience is really something that we see happening in the future, and something we're working on actively.
So, really great points there, Alex, about the positioning of bots. And actually, before we get on to these discussion points, I noticed a couple of times you've emphasized that bots are not there to displace people. Is that something that you see as a concern coming from customers or from their employees?
I think what happens is right now, this is still a fairly new technology being introduced to the business, right? So it is a bit of a concern when people think of bots, and they think of bots usually in the sense of robotic process automation, right? Where it's doing the job of a person. In this case, what we want to do is take away more of the mundane tasks, and then from there, give people the freedom to do more meaningful tasks, to be more productive. So really, we just see bots more in the assistant light, as opposed to the the human equivalent.
Which brings on to who is the maintainer of a bot, because presumably the answers that it gives, you're going to have to keep updating the content behind it and the logic behind it.
Yeah, so right now, when it comes to these projects, you'll see that these are still really IT driven, as far as the maintenance goes, the setup goes, and all of that. And that will probably be the case for I guess you could say, a little bit for the near future. We're trying to move away from that model, though, and we see that model changing quite a bit, because we want to have the respective departments, or I guess really the owner of the bot, to be able to go in, make changes, update the bot, things like that. So for instance, you could think of something like an HR bot. Why is it that an HR director can't be the one going in there and making the tweaks, right, when it isn't something that requires code or custom development? So I think as we move in toward the future, we're going to see a lot more local maintenance of the bot, as opposed to this all just being driven through IT.
So we're going to reach a point where, for example, the HR person who looks after compensation would be responsible for that part of an HR services bot?
Yeah, exactly right. And being able to go in, update those, and perhaps even add new functionality to the bot without having to be a developer.
Yeah, okay, nice. And then the next question is, the thing about bots is that they tend to sit inside other interfaces, don't they? So you mentioned Slack, for example, earlier. So how do you remind people that the bot is something that can be addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first step to that is making sure that the bot sits somewhere that is being used within your organization. So this is something that I've seen. We've actually done a project where a bot deploys to text. We've worked on other bots that talk with Yammer, other ones that just sit within perhaps a SharePoint page. So really the first thing I think is understanding where the bot actually would be engaged with best. And then from there, it's really making a a really powerful bot that has a solid user experience so that people aren't discouraged by it. They have a good experience, and really it becomes a referral thing at that point where people have a good experience, they refer to the bot, other people are able to go to that bot and have a similar experience. But certainly some company promotion within this as being a really good thing and something that can save time is also quite helpful.
And I suppose initially you need to tell people to go somewhere to find the bot, do you?
Yeah, exactly, right. So some of the company promotion to say, hey, you know, we're releasing this chatbot, and I think kind of moving into the third point there, which is, do you make the bot human? I don't think that the bot should ever be confused as an actual person. I think it should still be a bot. But one of the things that we found that really helps with the initial adoption is giving it human-like characteristics. So we name our bots. That's one thing that we really like to do. And you'll see that actually that I've done that. In the screenshot to the right, you'll see that we've named James here. So James is the ServiceNow bot. So we found that giving it an image, giving it even a picture, like a little avatar, so people know they can see that they're talking with something that's not just a robot as it's conceptualized. But even within that, giving it a little bit more of a personality. So I don't think we have to trick the users into thinking that they're talking with something other than a chatbot. But I think giving a bot a personality and a little bit of a flair and a name and a look and feel is really important when it comes to the adoption side of things.
Yeah, I agree. And there was the Nielsen Norman Group report recently where they were studying consumer reactions to chatbots. But one of their observations was that when people understand that they're not talking to a human, they simplify their language, and that probably helps with the overall success that you would get from dealing with a bot. And the other thing that was in this Nielsen Norman Group report was some consumers feel that if a company provides a bot to deal with them, it's somehow investing less in the customer, almost like they're putting up a barrier between them. Do you think companies should also be conscious that this is possibly a signal they could send out?
Yeah, I think they should be cautious of it, but I think that there is some messaging that can support it that actually shows that they would care more about their people. And I think a really good example of that is some work that I've just done recently in the public sector with a bot. One of the things that the customer told me was they said, we have a help desk, and roughly 80% of the tickets that they get are problems that the end user themselves could solve. There's something like a restart or some kind of a software fix or things like that, something that wouldn't require a full-blown ticket. And really what we've done with them is we've put a knowledge base in between them and then submitting a ticket, right? So for instance, this bot that you see here is actually that bot where you can say, at any point, you can submit a ticket, but what we want to do is we want to try to help you in the moment. So rather than you having to wait a week, in this case, to submit a ticket, that you can very quickly go in, see some information, get some troubleshooting advice. So I think the messaging to go along with it is again, not one of displacing work or not one of making it seem like the company cares less about its people, but more of an alternate way to potentially get them better help than they would have if there wasn't a bot in between them and whatever they were trying to do.
And I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? If the bot actually solves your problem really quickly, then you feel good about the whole experience. If it just delays getting to an answer because you go through the bot and then you have to go through a person, then it's not the bot's fault, is it? It's actually about the quality of the execution.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that we're finding really is that when it comes to a bot needing to escalate, we need the bot to be really good at that, because we don't want a bot that is going to fail and frustrate the end user. When the bot is no longer able to help, which may be a pretty substantial amount at the time, we want to make sure that the bot is able to hand off to whatever the I guess you could say the second phase of support would be. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a bit about building bots, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Gonna go to the. Yep. So when it comes to, I guess what we do as a platform, we offer a bot builder platform, and what you can do is create your own bots. You can add what we call abilities to the bot, which are basically just functionality that you can add pretty easily. Configure it, name your bot, give it a color, things like that, and really quickly make bots. I actually just did a bot demo today. We made a bot within the demo. It took us about 5 minutes, right? So what we did is we gave the bot the ability to book meetings. It's a pre-built integration with something like the Outlook calendar. And then so being able to go in there and actually create a bot from scratch, which is not something that has been the typical approach to these kind of projects. So certainly if anyone is interested in this, they can reach out to my email there, or they can connect with me on LinkedIn. Certainly the information will be sent out after the webinar. So that's what we do as a company, and we're really excited. We've just brought on a bunch of big names in the last 6 months or so for bots projects. And yeah, so certainly reach out with any questions.
Great. Thank you, Alex. So I wanted to finish off by sharing some of the success factors that have come out from ClearBox's own analysis of this space. And as Alex says, you know, it's a relatively new technology in the sense of doing it at this scale. And as this bag from the Chatbot Conf in 2016 shows, chatbots don't always get it right. And being realistic about what kinds of scenarios we can point bots at, I think, is essential to getting past that initial maybe resistance that you would see in terms of them being a form of interaction. So we come up with 6 success factors for bots. The first of all is that the bot should be available, and available in an interface that's already open, because in the consumer world, one of the reasons why bots have taken off is that they work really well within messaging apps, particularly in China within things like WeChat. They're a very, very popular way for consumers to interact with companies because they've already got chat open. So mentioning the bot and saying, hey, pizza bot, order me a pizza, as a way to initiate it works really well, rather than having to go to a separate website, or even worse, downloading a separate app onto your phone. In the workplace then, availability probably means in something like Slack or Teams or another interface that's already open on the desktop, rather than it being a separate place to go. Secondly, as we discussed, it needs to be maintainable. So I've worked in the intranet space for an awfully long time, and there was a point where for any change to be made on an intranet page, you would have to submit a request through to IT or a request through to the agency that built it. And what happened was that the content stagnated. It became too hard to make quick changes, so people said, oh, well, we'll only review it every 6 months. Or if there was a cost associated with the change because it was outsourced, and people said, oh, it's too expensive, well, we won't make that change, and therefore it started feeding inaccurate information. I see the same thing needs to happen with bots. So it's great if we can get to the point where these tools say, if you are responsible for answering all the HR questions, then you are also responsible for looking after the bot directly. Thirdly, it needs to be transactional. So it's very quick to create a bot, for example, where you could point it at a bunch of text with FAQs, and some of the products will automatically parse your FAQs and recognize the keywords in the question parse and come back with the answer parse. The problem with that is that normally when people ask a question, it's only an intermediate step to actually wanting to complete some kind of task. So how many days leave do I have? You got 20 days leave. Great. Can I book 3 days off? At that point, you want to stay within the bot and book those 3 days rather than be taken into a completely different time management system. Fourthly, it should be universal. So Alex talked a little bit earlier about there being a range of cobots in these org chart diagram. And I think it's absolutely right that the assistants should specialize in different areas. But what we should avoid is burdening users with knowing which bot can do which task. So really, we want that universal bot that sits on top and federates out the queries to the right sub-bot, if you want to handle it that way, to the right sub-bot to do the execution. Fifthly, it should provide answers, not links. So if I say, how many days leave do I have? What you don't want is for the bot to come back with a link to the staff handbook saying it's on page 120, here's the PDF. It actually needs to say, Sam, you personally have 10 days leave in the ideal world. And lastly, and probably the biggest challenge in terms of the current state of AI, is that it needs to handle true conversations. Because rather than using point and click interfaces, which can be very linear, in normal conversation, what we like about dealing with people is that they are very flexible in terms of the input that they like. But one of the biggest challenges is called anaphora. So in everyday speech, we might say, for example, he bit into the apple and spat it out, and we know what it is. Or with a bot where you're ordering pizza, you might be halfway through and change your mind and say to the bot, change that to a thin crust. And it's got to know that when you say that, it means the order that you're just talking about. So, Alex, I mean, the last thing about all this is that when you scale up from one bot to many, then you've got to start doing all the kind of coordination things that happen in governance across our digital workplaces. So who do you think should be leading the decisions about who should deploy a bot within an organization now?
Yeah, so I think that the key is that initially, I think just a small group that is able to successfully deploy a bot really should start small. And then very quickly, like we had kind of discussed before, being able to go to each department and have that department look after their own bot strategy, perhaps with just a couple of people who have implemented successfully in other programs. It's probably what we're going to see in the future is, again, that more local, more segregated approach, as opposed to this being just this IT powerhouse, as we've seen with some of these other projects.
Okay, I do think maybe, you know, as an organization, it's the execution that's the big part now that technology is getting relatively straightforward. So I would say if you see bots happening in your organization, try and hook into that so that you can get towards that point of convergence longer term. Even if it's just deciding which bot handles which query when someone enters the word like bookings, for example, knowing what you might mean by bookings for everything from meeting rooms through to booking travel.
Exactly. Totally agree.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we're nearly on the hour. I just wanted to mention an offer that we have from ClearBox. We produce this annual SharePoint Intranet in a Box report. It is the most comprehensive review of anything to do with SharePoint add-ons that take the basic functionality and turn it into something which is much more functional for collaboration, for communication, and for delivering services. LiveTiles is in there, and quite a few of the products that we talk about are also active in this bot space. We've got a 10% off code for you there. If you go to clearbox.co.uk and go to checkout, it will ask for a coupon. If you put in live web, then you'll get 10% off and you can download it immediately as a PDF. So here's our contact details. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. Both ClearBox is at ClearBox and at LiveTiles on Twitter were there. Any questions? I'm sure we'd both love to hear from you. Alex, any closing words?
No, certainly if anyone has any questions or concerns, feel free to follow up with us, but we appreciate your time, certainly for joining us. So thank you for that.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a good day.